Chaim Ben Tzir and Benny asked me to say a shir, and I'm starting from something very, very basic about tzitzis. Now, this in Pirush HaMishnayos Rambam, he makes a comment, why is there no Masechta tzitzis? Why is there no Masechta tefillin? There's no, you've got Masechta, so he says things which are so regular, and everyone kind of knows the basic halachas, so you don't need to have a whole Masechta of Mishnayos about this. So we don't have a Masechta tzitzis. There is, I'm sure, of course, in the Masechtas Ktanas, there is, in the Brisa, and the Gemara in Menachos talks about it at length. It's like it brought it by the way. But all right, let's start. We have in Torah, the mitzvah of tzitzis is mentioned in two places. One place is in what we say every day, in Shema. Then we have another place in Parshas Kiseitze, Gedilim ta'aseh lecho al arba kampos ksuscha. So we've got one thing called tzitzis, and then we have something called gedilim. Now the word gedilim would be translated probably as a braid, to braid. And the tzitzis and then we have the tzitzis means a fringe, as we have in the pasuk in Yechezkel, vayikocheni b'tzitzis roishi. So the tzitzis are typically made of two aspects rather, where we have the gedil part and the psil, the loose ends, and we've got the braided part. And these two together comprise the mitzvah of tzitzis, and that's the gedilim and the tzitzis. We know that there's no chiyuv to have a four-cornered garment and put on tzitzis, but it's certainly something which we are encouraged to go out of our way to have a four-cornered garment, to have tzitzis, because the purpose is, after all, l'man tizkuru, in order to remember all the mitzvahs. And Alter Rebbe mentions in Shulchan Aruch, b'dugma, a person would tie a knot in his belt to remember. So the tzitzis is there to remember, and therefore it's encouraged that we should have that reminder with us to remind us of the mitzvahs, etc. Before going further, I want to just address another thing, that these threads, which we make the tzitzis, have a chiyuv, they have to be made lishma. And there are different stages. There's the spinning and there's the twisting of making these threads, but certainly at some stage they have to be made lishma. And there was a time that there was in Eretz Yisrael a factory in Kiryat Gat, which was producing tzitzis en masse. I'm not talking about the tzitzis which you get with, shmoy kofel shmoy. I'm talking about very basic tzitzis which we go out to Yidden who just keeping the basic mitzvahs. And this factory was being operated by Goyish workers. I'm not sure about whether it was done on Shabbos or not. At any rate, the Sichat HaShavua carried an article going back some 20 years or so, raising very serious problems, because Lomesdog in a machine-made tzitzis would be just as acceptable like machine-made matzahs. It's called lishma. Fine. But what happens when the machine stops for some reason? And then who switches it on? So then it's the Goyish workers who are there in this Polgat factory. So they're making the tzitzis which are not lishma. So they're not kosher tzitzis, which means that a person wearing tzitzis is not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis and is making a bracha levatala. Anyway, he made a whole fuss, and as a result of this, the Sichat HaShavua has got a very wide circulation. And as a result, it actually made a change in the factory, that they would have a mashgiach there who would be there to make sure that whenever the machine switched on, it switched on by a yid, etc. Okay, let's move on. Perhaps you remember there was a time where they discovered that a lot of the parchment used for writing Sefer Torah in America was from a non-Jewish source. Do you remember that's a whole fire parsha? This is about 30 years ago. There was a company which was producing parchment for drums, to make the drums. And somehow some dishonest fellow was selling this for parchment for writing Sefer Torah. It was a big issue. Zalman Shimon at the time found some kind of heter, b'diavad, etc. Okay, let's come back. we have two types of talus. We've got what we call a talus cotton and a talus godel. So the first person who we know who wore talus cotton, we have the whole story with David HaMelech, that he was in the bathhouse, and he says, "Oi, I'm naked without any mitzvah, without any mitzvahs." Then he remembered he has the bris milah, so then he says, "Soso nechia im rosecho k'moisa shalorov." Why? What about other times? So he always had tzitzis with him. So that was he had the other mitzvah of tzitzis. So he was wearing tzitzis the whole day. But actually, more practically speaking, in olden times, people would wear garments which were more like what we call a toga, which would be more square, and therefore they would wear square garments, square robes, and they would put in tzitzis. When our style of clothing changed, and we started wearing shirts which have got sleeves, etc., so then the square garment becomes obsolete as a default kind of garment. And then people, I don't know who, and I don't know when exactly, but someone came up with an idea of taking a square garment, cutting a hole in the middle, and allowing it to be worn over your head. And in that way, you could be Mekayim mitzvah tzitzis, and it's compatible with the more modern type of clothing. Now, the Alter Rebbe wrote Shulchan Aruch, as you know. He also wrote a Siddur, and he never published his Shulchan Aruch in his lifetime. It was written when he was a young man. In the he started B'chai Chiyusi of the Midrash Magid, which is around Tov Kuf Lamed Gimel. He passed away, and the Alter Rebbe passed away exactly 40 years later, almost. And all this time, the Shulchan Aruch was in manuscript, and it was never published. In the interim, the Alter Rebbe prepared the Siddur, published the Siddur, and we know that generally accepted it was Tov Kuf Samach Gimel. It was published, and he also in the interim period he had written various short tracts of halacha, and they were appended to the Siddur, put in the Siddur. So one of them was Hilchos Tzitzis, and what we can see is from the first edition to the second edition, there's the one chidush which the Alter Rebbe added after the first print of the Siddur, and I'm going to share that with you. The joke is, how do you recognize a Lubavitcher Bocher on the street? Well, if he's got his shirt sticking out, that's probably a Lubavitcher Bocher. Why do Chabad Bocherim have their shirts sticking out? So that's because they want to keep their tzitzis without being creased, without being folded. And this is a very big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. He says that there's a prescribed size of tzitzis, of a garment. He says about the amo square in front, amo in the back. But then he adds that this shear should not be crumpled. And if whatever is crumpled is deducted from the shear. And the Alter Rebbe in this is actually in conflict with an earlier posuk who he mentions in other topics. There's a sefer called Beis Yaakov, Chaylos Teshuvas Beis Yaakov. And the Beis Yaakov, he says, a crumpled talus, it's okay, because we have an expression many times in the Gemara, Kolo oimid li sorev kesorev dami, oimid, so he says, oimid lihi poshet ke poshet dami. Since it can be opened out, so then it doesn't matter that it's crumpled. And the Alter Rebbe, as I say, he was later than this, the Teshuvas Beis Yaakov, and he disagrees with that. And he says, no, that the shear of talus cotton has to be actually uncrumpled, because whatever is crumpled is lost from the shear. Now, what's the svara over here? So we all know that the Mishnah, etc., if a shofar from Avodah Zarah is possible because it's oimid lisorav kesorav dami. And we have the expression ketuse michtes l'shiure. It's as if the shear has been crushed. It's broken into little pieces. So a shofar needs to be a tefach big to be able to be visible on either side of the hand. If the shofar is from Avodah Zarah, it's as if it's been burned and crushed to little pieces, and it's possible. A lulav from Avodah Zarah and esrog from Avodah Zarah is ktusi michtas l'shiura, and it's as if it doesn't have the shear. So now here's the question which was raised going back some 600-700 years ago. It's mentioned in the Meiri. What about taking schach from a tree which was designated, which was worshipped? Schach from Avodah Zarah. Is the schach taken from a, now it's not called hano, don't worry about the hano aspect, because we have a term mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu. A mitzvah is not considered a personal benefit, so that's not a problem. But the question is, do we say, just like the esrog shel Avodah Zarah doesn't have a shear, so the same thing we should say with the schach of Avodah Zarah? And here the Meiri says, no. There's no din in the size of the schach. There's a din that the sukkah, which is minimum 7 by 7 tefachim, should have more shade than sunlight. It should be tzilosa meruba mechamosa. But there's no intrinsic dimension for the schach. And therefore, even after you're going to say ketusi michtas l'shiura, it's as if it's been crushed, it doesn't matter, because there's no shear in the schach per se. It's a shear in the area to be covered. And my suggestion is that the Alter Rebbe takes the view that the shear of the tzitzis, of the garment, it's not a din in the size of the garment. It's a din in the coverage of the body. If you look in the Alter Rebbe's Lashon, he's quite emphatic here, because it says it's got to do with kisui haguf. So don't tell me, Alomdus, that the beggar has got a shear. That doesn't help me, because the shear of the Talis cotton is a shear in the coverage of the body rather than a shear in the garment per se. I'm going to share with you this was recently released on one of the other websites with Rabbi Gedalia Korfel of Hashalom. So my daughter got engaged and married to his great nephew, and at the Vort, he told me the following, which I'm going to share with you, although he's repeated it. He said that it was several months after the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, and the Rebbe called me and my good friend, I believe he said it was David Raskin, and he called us both into his room. On the table, the Rebbe was standing near the table, near his desk, and on his desk was spread out a talis cotton of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe was holding a ruler, a centimeter, he said in Yiddish, and in our presence, he measured this talis cotton. He showed us how the width of that talis cotton is 63 centimeters. To say that the Rebbe, as in the Frierdiker Rebbe, did not rely on the shear of Amor, which Reb Chaim Noah would say is 48, 49 centimeters, and instead he was medakdik to have a larger shear. Now, I don't remember whether the brackets is from Reb Gedalia or from the Rebbe, that I don't remember. We have when we build a mikveh, so we don't rely on the smaller size of an Amor. We actually go for a much bigger Amor. And now I've got in front of me, I've got here a centimeter, I've got here a ruler. And so we have here a shear of 48 centimeters, would be just about 19 inches. 63 centimeters would be just under 25 inches. That's quite a wide shear, quite a large talis cotton. And the Frierdiker Rebbe he was particular that his talis cotton should be of that width of 63 centimeters. The length was twice 63, which means 126. That was the length. However, that length included the opening for the neck, the hole for the neck, and then he measured from the front edge of the talis cotton till the opening for the neck, and that was actually fitted to the shear of Reb Chaim Noah of 49 centimeters. the point which the Rebbe said was that there's a debate. It's debatable whether the area of the hole it counts as part of the Tal's cotton, and as therefore when it came to the length, so therefore he relied in this respect. He relied on Reb Chaim Noah that from the hole to the bottom of the front was 49 centimeters, but for the overall length he had twice 63 centimeters, taking the larger shear. Okay, I just wanted to share that with you. Let me unshare it. And just after Gedalia was nifta, they played, there was a tape of an interview of him telling over this story. I met him at a later stage, and he always felt bad that he felt that the Rebbe had told him this for public consumption, and he felt he hadn't done justice to spreading this Inyan. Okay, so I'm just trying to help him in that. I just actually noticed another thing over Yom Tov. By the way, we also in London, we lost a prominent member of our Kehillah by the name of Rabbi Tzin Hackner and Olav Shalom. And one of the things which he loved was to read the Sichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he would, whenever he had an occasion, he would share with other people things which he saw in the Sichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And so I'm speaking to Anash in London, so I encourage over Yom Tov people a bit of spare time to take encouragement from his example. And so I was also myself over Yom Tov browsing a lot in the Sichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So one thing which I noticed, that the Rebbe Rashab would ask his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, what do you remember? Even when he was a very little boy, 4 years old or something, he would ask him, what do you remember? And one of the things which he says, he remembers the Zayda. He remembers that in the Rebbe Marash, and he wore a vest, how do you say, a vest in America, yeah? And he had 2 golden chains, because he had 2 watches, which he wore in his vest pockets. And he described how his tal's cotton was visible beyond the vest. So he had this, and you have also a picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe himself, where you can see how he had his tal's cotton sticking out of his vest. So that was the style which they had. And actually, I want to say though, the Rebbe did not have his tal's cotton sticking out generally, for the simple reason that you cannot have your tal's cotton sticking out and wear what you call in America suspenders, braces. It's not possible. So you have to have your tal's cotton inside your trousers, what we call, and you call them pants. And so the Rebbe did not have that minhag, but that's what was the more customary in years bygone. Okay, let's come back to my list of my agenda. So many brachas come up. The nusach habracha. Many brachas are mentioned in passing in the Gemara. My mevorich, everyone knows the sugar in Chanukah and Shabbos. My mevorich. The bracha on tzitzis is mentioned in passing. I think in Gemara Yevamos, the bracha is lehis atef b'tzitzis, to wrap yourself with tzitzis. This raised a question. If you put on tzitzis without wrapping yourself, are you fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis? So you had the shitta of the Geonim, who took the view that since Chazal coined the bracha lis atef b'tzitzis, that tells you that if you don't do lis atef, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. Later, Rishonim disagree with that, and they say that the atifa is not crucial for mitzvah tzitzis. Even without atifa, you're fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. But that's why Benny, it says he's got 9 minutes left. Is that an issue? Continue. Did you have a set time when the shir should end? I can't hear you because you're muted.
No, I figured it should take half hour. So
okay. So all right. So, all right.
If we have to, we could re-log in.
Okay. So we have here the idea of atifa, and what we do nowadays is as soon as we put on our talus, we wrap ourselves round with a talus similar to what's called atifa sayishmaelim, and we do that for a short time time to take dal damas, to walk dal damas, and then we wear the talus in a more casual way. Now, it's actually interesting that this comes up in today's Chumash, where we have Hatzarua Shaboy Hazov Godov Yiyu Kruim Rosh Yeparua Al Sofom Yate. The term of Atifas Yishmaelim. It says in the Gemara, Kol Atifa She'ena Katifas Yishmaelim is not a valid Atifa. So this din of Atifa comes up in the din of Avelus. And it says by the Metzoida of Al Sofam Yate, if you look at the Targum, it says, Ka'avela Yis'atov. So the Metzoida would wrap the talus around himself, similar to an ovel. And the ovel used traditionally would wrap his talus over his mouth, as if to say, I'm not ready to communicate. So that was the style of Atifas Ishmael. What's important to address here, when people do atifa, sometimes you see people wrapping themselves up totally and almost hermetically. Now, the Ishmaelim would cover their face to a degree with the talus, and that seems to be because in a sandy area, if there would be sand blowing in their direction, to protect their eyes. But to say that the Ishmaelim would go around with their faces completely wrapped up with it, completely, like a mummy, that just doesn't make sense. And as a result, when we do the atifa in the morning, I know it's more cozy to be wrapped up all the way down, and you feel more intimate with the Ebershter, etc. But the atifa should be done in a way that it does cover the eyes, but in a way that it's down, let's say down to your nose or your mouth, but it should be in a way a little bit loose, that you should be able to see a little bit ahead of you. To copy the style of Atifas Ishmaelim, where they would cover their face somewhat, but could see where they're going. I want to share with you another important point. I'm just pulling out my talus. Unfortunately, my talus is at home, as many of us are confined to home. So the Alter Rebbe introduces, I don't know whether you can see, okay, I'll put it up to the camera. The Alter Rebbe introduces an extra hole here, where after we put the 4 threads through the bigger hole, then we make a double knot, and then we take the shamus and put it through that little hole, and then we proceed with making the chulyas. What's the reason for that hole? So the word is that we have a pasuk, Al kanfe bigdeichem, that the tzitzis should be on the corners. And Chazal will say, Al v'loy tachas. What that is understood to be, if you would wear your tzitzis, with the tzitzis hanging straight down, that would be called tachas. When you wear the tzitzis, the expression which is used in Shulchan Aruch is makal hakeren. The tzitzis should be worn in a way that the beginning of the tzitzis is actually beating and touching the corner of the garment. So the Alter Rebbe was concerned if you wouldn't have this, so sometimes and like the Weltische tzitzis, they can sometimes be hanging straight down. And to a Bavoran, that it shouldn't be hanging straight down, it should remain kind of parallel to the beged. The Alter Rebbe introduces a very big chiddush, and some challenge this, but it's the Alter Rebbe's chiddush to make this extra little hole and to secure that the tzitzis shouldn't be hanging straight down, it should be at the side. Now, for your back tzitzis, that's fairly straightforward, it keeps that way. For your front tzitzis, then it's not so posh, because it sometimes depends how you're wearing your talus, it can be a little bit messy, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes it'll hang like straight down like this, and one should be careful about that, because the whole this whole chiddush of the extra hole is in order to bavoren that it shouldn't be hanging straight down. We have a mitzvah to, try to be mekatzer. We have a din of boidik, to be checked at tzitzis every day. And I read a question. The hole on the corner, isn't the corner 3 fingers? I didn't follow the question exactly. We have the minimum size of the, you can unmute yourself, it's okay. And you can tell us your question.
Right, hi Rav. The corner, isn't it from the very corner, from that little spot where the fabric comes together? So isn't it 3 fingers up and 3 fingers in, so that you have the hole where we're making the hole where we begin to tie the tzitzis? Isn't that all considered the corner?
Yes.
So what the Alter Rebbe is doing is being really super medaic, that the corner is really that pinah where the fabric ends, that's the corner.
Okay, I'll explain a little bit more. You have 2 styles of making tzitzis. We have the way we have in talus cotton, which has got 2 holes, and we have the way on a talus godel, which is going to got 1 hole. So I'm going to pull up my talus cotton for a second to the camera. So now, with the talus cotton, you don't have to worry about this, because all of this area, the whole, as you call the pinah, the whole area is called the corner, and all of this is makar lakeren. This is tzitzis already, and therefore it's all touching the corner. The problem is with the talus godel is that the tzitzis per se only starts from the first knot, and it's hanging with 1 hole, and therefore it's starting at the edge, and then you have the problem that it's not touching the edge.
I see.
That's where the Alter Rebbe made this extra thing in the talus godel, not in the talus cotton.
Very nice. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. Right. So we have a mitzvah of checking the tzitzis, a chiv to check the tzitzis, and that should also be done with the talus cotton too. That means in the morning, before you put in your talus, you check the tzitzis on your talus cotton and on your talus godel, because the bracha which you make on your talus godel is also for your talus cotton. Because most of us married people, I can say for myself, I rarely make a bracha al mitzvah tzitzis, because when I put on the talus in the morning for shacharis, I have in mind the talus cotton. I'm going to tell you one exception when I do make a bracha on the talus cotton, and that's on Friday afternoon. And I'm just sharing this because I've got a bit of a peeve about this. I see people wearing, they change their shirt for Shabbos, and they change their suit, and they change their undershirt, and they're wearing the same Zayah Shel Mitzvah for months on end. And, you know, they think that's a Hiddur Mitzvah. Actually, the din of Bigdei Shabbos is either you wear special clothes for Shabbos, which are miyuchet for Shabbos, or at least they're clean for Shabbos. And there's no reason, in my mind, that talus cotton should be any less than any other garment that should be miyuchet for Shabbos, or at least clean for Shabbos. And therefore, when you go to mikveh and you change, Bez Hashem, we should be able to go to mikvahs and be able to, at any rate, you wash yourself, you change for Shabbos, you change for talus cotton. Now, you can't rely on the bracha in the morning because it's a different garment. And therefore, you should be making a bracha al mitzvah tzitzis after you've put on the fresh talus cotton in the afternoon. Okay, one last thing, I want to share with you. You know, our tzitzis are made up with chulias, made of 4 units. You got, the braid is made up of 4 units, 5 knots, and in between, each one is called a chulia. But you all know that there's a difference between the way Chabad make our tzitzis to most other kreisen, most other circles, where we have this kind of 3, made into subunits. And what's the reason for this? So the Gemara says, it talks in the times when they had tcheles, it says, "Hapoiches lo yifches mishivo, moisif lo yosef al shloisha asa." That in the times when they had tcheles, they would have the first chulia there'd be a bit of blue wool at the bottom, then there would be white, and then they would finish off with blue, and they would have a minimum, as I said, a minimum of 7 chulias and a maximum of 13 chulias. 7 is corresponding to the Shiva Rekiim, and the 13 is the 7 heavens plus the gaps, the spaces between them. So there is a cheshbon of having 13 chulyas. Once the union of et chelis became obsolete, then the poskim say that's the reason why the general minig is to have just 4 chulyas. Remember the cheshbon by dafka 4, but that's why we're not so makpid on having the 7 or the 13 chulyas. Having all 39 circuits, the thread, the shamash goes around 39 times, which means 3 times 13. And in fact, we have with the Mir Chabad, which kind of separates each 3 circuits from the other. So in effect, we've kind of brought into our tzitzis, we managed to have the union of 13 chulyas, and in that way we are able to fulfill what it says in the Gemara, and that I believe is the reason for the Chabad minig, the way we do the chulyas.